He scarcely ever invited anyone to breakfast except his officers when he took breakfast in the garden. He preferred to have this meal in his room so that he need not dress himself until nearly 2 o'clock, spending the morning up till this hour in his sleeping attire, but at 7 in the evening, at which hour dinner was at first held, he very often, almost daily, invited some to the meal. The Wilkes, the Skeletons, the Admiral, Colonel Bingham, officers of the 53rd, in turn, all those of any consequence on the island, and these guests left very much impressed. Santini in livery announced the guest. Gentilini as head footman, and Rousseau laid the tables and instructed the sailors who were acting as footmen. Only silver was used. The silver plate was so considerable that when later more than 130 pounds of it were broken up and sold, there still remained 234 plates, 34 dishes, 3 tureens, 2 sauce boats, 96 tablecloths, and a quantity of smaller articles. The fare was not extraordinarily good, despite the experienced taste of Masson, but it appeared marvelous to the English officers, in the main unfamiliar with French delicacies. Ordinarily, the menu consisted of a soup, a curry, 2 entrees, roast joint with 2 extra dishes, one of which was a sweet. Extreme moderation prevailed, seeing it was an epoch in which, among private individuals, 4 entrees were the rule. The emperor, however, had this number of dishes whenever he had distinguished guests, but even on these occasions, dinner never lasted more than 40 minutes. Maitre d'Hotel Cipriani, in a green coat with silver braid, a waistcoat, black silk breeches, white gloves, buckled shoes, arranged the dishes. On the left, the right of the emperor's seat stood Saint-Denis and Novaraz in same attire except for gold braid on their collars, cuffs, and gauntlets, who supplied themselves only to His Majesty. The other guests were served by Gentilini and his sailor footmen in green livery with gold lace, red waistcoats and breeches, and by Bernard, Bertrand's servant. At dessert, the butler Pierron put on the table the 8 dishes of stewed fruit from the magnificent Sevres china service, representing the various battlefields of Egypt and Europe. The plates belonging to his precious service made at Sevres, and called the headquarters service, were of green and gold pattern, ornamented with ancient swords surmounted by laurels, and on the bottom was painted a landscape executed from a sketch drawn most often from nature and enlivened by soldiers. It is difficult to describe these paintings in any other way. If the emperor had not disposed of several of these plates as presents, if on January 1st, 1817, he had not given Madame Bertrand the picture crossing the Danube in which the Grand Marshal was immortalized, and to Madame de Montesson a scene from the Egyptian campaign, some idea of them might be conceived. Of the 5 dozen plates brought to St. Helena, there remained 54 at the inventory in 1821. For apart from these 2 having been given away or broken, it is not known what the trustee has done with these 54 plates. With the Sevres was used also silverware, which was a wonderful piece of work. There were only 28 pieces, but all the accessories. The party passed into the drawing room for coffee. Coffee was brought in a silver coffee pot and sugar basin, and served in Sevres china cups. The coffee service, wrote Sir George Bingham to his wife after dining at Longwood, was the most beautiful I have ever seen. On each cup was an Egyptian scene, and on the saucer the portrait of a bey or other distinguished person. In France, they cost 1 cup and saucer 25 guineas. The emperor made a present to some English ladies of 2 or 3 of these cups, one among others bearing a representation of Cleopatra's Needle, the saucers being broken. The emperor then desired that his Sevres should no longer be used. If the 21 cups and 20 saucers had disappeared, like the dessert plates and all the silverware, one could at least picture what they were like, for the emperor offered the Duchess of Bassano a coffee set as a Christmas present in 1814, the cups and saucers of which were identical with those brought to St. Helena, the scenes, like the portraits, being executed from sketches made in Egypt by Vivant Denon. The bottom of some was a lovely blue, decorated by bright golden hieroglyphics on the saucers were portraits in black and white, set in an edging of gold. Sir George Bingham exaggerated when he said they cost 25 guineas a cup and a saucer. The breakfast set of 10 pieces offered to Madame de Masson was a product of Sevres for 1,355 francs, including the tray. But it is probable that Napoleon had mentioned this figure, for his Sevres was priceless to him. It was the relic of his greatness which seemed the most characteristic of him, and by showing it to the English, it seemed to him that it would teach them his history and at the same time demonstrate the progress of the arts during his reign. It cannot be pretended that the English officers who were guests were entertained by these meals, at which the French, out of respect, did not speak unless addressed by the emperor, which the food was consumed with great haste, at which no one remained at table to drink wine, and finally at which the customs were wholly continental, but they were flattered and a little dazzled, which was without doubt just what the emperor wanted. At the same time, in his horse riding, he would enter all the gardens which he found on his way, dismount, chat with the inhabitants, distribute some Napoleons, and make himself very popular. That went a long way. In these early days, he could always have easily found agents to get letters or parcels to Europe. For the time being, however, his thoughts did not point in that direction. They were occupied with his work, which, according to his custom, he carried on by repeated dictations until he found that precise shape, regular and clear, which alone seemed to him befitting history. He had almost finished the first period, but he attached more importance to some parts than to others. Egypt in particular carried him away, just as he always returned to his disaster, which remained incomprehensible to him, and skipped the consulate. So did he from the early days to 1815, to the return of the Bourbons, to the Belgian campaigns. He divided the work among several, and at this moment Las Casas seemed involved in the least pleasant episodes. For that reason, perhaps his companions, despite continued sulkiness, lived among themselves on terms of apparent amity.